This is Annapolis Week on MarylandReporter.com. I'm Len Lazarick, and this week we're doing a Reporters Roundtable with a roundup of what happened during the General Assembly session. With me today is Kenny Burns from WNAV, 1430 AM, John Wagner from the Washington Post, and Lou Davis from Maryland Public TV. This show will also be broadcast on WNAV 1430 on Tuesday.
We are at the portion where it's kind of sad, really, because this is the last show of the year and this is the last breakdown segment for the 2011 legislative session. And much like last year, I'm bringing in three colleagues from the State House Press Corps to help break down what happened over the past 90 days. Len Lazarick is editor and publisher of MarylandReporter.com. John Wagner is a reporter for the Washington Post, and Lou Davis is with Maryland Public Television. All three of these gentlemen have been on the program at one point in time during the legislative session. First and foremost, thank you all for joining me over the course of the year and joining me right now.
Good to be here.
Okay, I want to start with you, Len, because during one of your segments, you said that we were bad predictors, and I remember the day before, or as I like to call session eve, looking at everything and came down to two big issues that are going to dominate the session: gay marriage and budget. Was I oversimplifying?
No, actually, they did really dominate. If you want to throw into the whole budget thing, the pension controversy. So if you throw in the pensions and the rollback of benefits for state workers and teachers, and the gay marriage, unexpectedly, once it passed the Senate, that I think it was at that point where I said, people were saying, oh, the House is more liberal and it'll sail through, and then it ran into problems in the House. And that kind of derailed a lot of other things, although some things got derailed on their own, particularly part of the governor's agenda.
We'll get to that in a minute. John, gay marriage was ultimately a surprise that it didn't go through, because usually the House is a little bit more liberal than the upper house.
There had certainly been that assumption, and I think that was based on vote counts going back a couple of years. And the Democrats did lose 6 seats in the House of Delegates in the last election, so they were a little further behind there. But I think really there was just so much attention paid to the Senate vote by advocates of the same-sex marriage bill that things were not tended to as much in the House as they had been.
And Lou, Senate President Thomas Mike Miller pretty much put his foot down once they passed that gay marriage bill and said, we are not going to consider any changes. Either you pass it or you don't, and they didn't even get to that point.
Well, Mike Miller does that a lot. And the reason, of course, is that it's so much more difficult on a controversial issue like that when the bill comes back to the Senate for a second time, because there is always the threat of a filibuster and lengthy debate there. But this whole same-sex bill, just, I think someone said, it sucked the entire oxygen out of the whole legislature. It was so controversial, and there was some very, very interesting but very, very long debate on it. It also backed everything else up.
And it wasn't just a matter of the players, it was a matter of everybody else talking about the players and what was happening with it, so that it was a significant distraction.
Yeah, the whole dynamic of the African American churches, the black churches in that thing was very interesting too, because it certainly didn't end up as being a partisan issue.
And that's the one thing that I wanted to bring up. I spoke with Delegate Simmons from Montgomery County. He wasn't surprised, but it seemed that most of the other delegates were caught off guard. There were a couple of delegates. One of them actually wavered in their support, one delegate, Tiffany Alston.
The media, I think, was certainly surprised by the way it came down at the end. I was standing there, in the chamber, surrounded by other reporters. I don't think anybody expected at that point for it to be referred back to committee like that.
And that's the one point I brought up with your colleague Charles Robinson earlier this year. No one predicted this happening. Yeah. No one. And I think it's safe to assume that this was probably one of the more compelling floor debates that we've seen down here in a long time.
One of the other interesting things I want to throw out was it was Chairman Valerio's vote in committee that brought the bill out to the House for a debate, and then he was the one that asked that it be sent back to committee.
And it
Wonder
was
if-
a
I wonder-
bill. It was a bill he really didn't support.
I wonder if this
No,
whole
and
thing
he
was.
usually doesn't vote in committee. I
Right,
mean, it was
correct.
totally designed to get the bill out onto the floor, and he, played
You-
the role of good chairman for the speaker to provide that vote.
You wonder if when he did this, when he voted that way in committee, he ultimately knew that he was going to do this on the floor a couple of weeks later.
That's a fair question to ask if you considering everything how it played out. And now we get to and speaking of which, the governor said that actually, speaking of bad predictions, he predicted that he would sign a bill this year in regards to same-sex marriage. That didn't happen, and for the most part, Governor O'Malley, he pretty much had a mixed results session.
Yeah, well, it might have been, a bridge too far. He said maybe he gave the General Assembly too much and they choked on it. Well, what they choked on was a steak with the bone left in. There were significant problems with his proposal to ban the septic expansion of the septic system in the rural areas, limiting it to 5 housing developments, and for the wind farm off the coast. And he really fought very hard. I don't know as he fought as hard on the septic farm, but septic proposal. But the wind farm, he certainly fought very, very, very hard on.
I mean, talk about surprises. The septic thing in his State of the State address, I think was also a surprise to everyone. And almost immediate reaction by legislators on both sides of the aisle was that it was dead on arrival.
There was
Especially in their
silence in the-
rural counties like Queen Anne's and so forth.
Yeah, there was silence in the chamber, during the State of the State address when he threw this out. It's the kind of thing you would want to have be a big applause line if you're going to get any momentum behind it.
And let's stick with the State of the State because it was not as boisterous or as applause-driven as one would think this year. And one speculation was because the governor pretty much gave his applause lines during his inaugural address.
Well, I would like to focus on a surprise. Who would have, and we haven't talked about it this way, but I was thinking as we're talking about surprises, who would have thought back in October when this pension commission got started deliberations that come January the governor would actually propose major changes to pensions of the 2 largest unions that had supported his reelection, and that despite the opposition of these unions, they would actually pass largely intact through both House and Senate right after this election. I would have to say, from a long-term time period, that's a bit of a surprise. You wouldn't have.
And that probably will be, with the long view, his biggest accomplishment this session. That he was able to do that with relatively little political bloodshed, especially when you look at what's taken place in Wisconsin and other states around the country. That he will be able to go out and say, well, Maryland was different.
Of course, it's a lot easier to do that in the first year of a 4-year term. That's when you do the controversial issues. That's when you get that stuff out of the way so that voters forget.
Yes, indeed. So in the closing moments of this 2011 legislative session, what do you expect to come back in 2012?
Well, there seems to be an awful lot of leftover business to attend to, starting with the governor's wind bill and septics and
Well, the thing is,
Cable
it's not
games.
just 2012 because we have a special session coming up in the fall on congressional redistricting, and there's already talk now of using that session for some unfinished business, tax
Raising
increases,
some taxes.
tax increases, whatever. Whether that will actually happen is hard to say, but something to look forward to in the fall. Not just, we don't have to wait another year for this to
You got to
happen.
remember the thing that never really came up in this session, except for some talking, was the gasoline tax, raising the gasoline
yes.
tax. Tough time to do it now when gasoline is almost
Close
at
to the record.
almost at $4 a gallon, but it could
And
come.
if that
it
holds
could come
true
up.
by the fall, I think we will be over $4 a gallon for regular.
Well,
Wait a minute, that's a prediction. I take that back. I take that back.
I think that's pretty safe.
Well, if we're bad predictors, it won't be $4 a gallon. So, and with that, Gentlemen, thank you very much. Len Lazarick from MarylandReporter.com, John Wagner from the Washington Post, Lou Davis from Maryland Public Television.
This has been Annapolis Week on MarylandReporter.com with a Reporters Roundtable on the General Assembly session. Thanks for being with us.